friends, you're listening to the Whole Potato Podcast with Krystian Kaywood. This podcast was created to encourage, equip, and empower caregivers, friends, and families in the disability community. My hope is that this is a safe place to feel seen, loved, and encouraged as you love God and people with disabilities. I'm so glad you're here. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Whole Potato Podcast. Today, I have a special guest, Jason Crippen, who I've known for a long time. Jason is known as probably one of the most loved special education teachers I've ever known. He has been in special education for about 23 years, 21 of them teaching, and now he has started his own company, which is all about employment for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, which is just super cool. So that's what we're going to spend our time talking about today. But welcome, Jason, to the podcast.
Thanks. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. And thanks for the kind words.
Yeah, absolutely. Jason and I met at Yes Camp years ago. And, you know, I think I can say it now, but Jason always had the coolest stuff going on in his room.
A lot of cardboard.
A lot of cardboard. But something I've always admired about you, Jason, is like you're so creative. You're always like out of the box. And I feel like you have never let there be limits in your space. I feel like you do such a good job, especially with young adults with disabilities. Like you constantly push them to do more, to see their worth, to understand their value. And I feel like that's why you've been so successful. And so kind of on that, would you just tell me about your backstory, your passion for people with disabilities, and kind of what got you to where you are today?
Sure. I appreciate that. And I also noticed what you did when you said thinking out of the box, because it's all about cardboard. Anyway, it's going to be a lot of cardboard talk. I mean, really, it started when I went to college at K-State. I was going to be a kindergarten teacher because I really, energy, ADD works for me. But I came back and it kind of morphed. I was a para in SPED and I really liked it. And there happened to be a long-term sub needed. And so I subbed in there. And, by happenstance, I ended up at Northwest as a para. And it was really exciting. And I could kind of do some things and started to realize that I really like this. And then I got my certification. I had to teach gen ed for a couple of years, which I really liked. And then I got called by East High and asked if I wanted to be one of the mixed abilities teachers, and I said I sure do, because in our realm, the sky's the limit for teaching, basically. I mean, you do have curriculum, but you have to tailor it, and you have to mash it, and you have to expand it, and so it's kind of just taking it and being as creative as you want, because everything is learning. So I really like that aspect because I make all my own stuff, and that was kind of where it went. And then tons of other stuff happened along the way, doing sports, doing Circle of Friends Club, doing any number of things, art shows. It was just tons of fun. And I decided after about 20 some years that I wanted to fill the gap between employment and our people, because there's a really big gap, unfortunately. It's getting smaller, but it takes care to work with, everyone to get them where they need to be. Yeah. So that brings us to today.
Yeah. Well, and I love that, you mentioned the gap, because I think, that was something that you were passionate about and did a ton of as a special education teacher, as you were constantly helping your students learn life skills, get job opportunities and things. But you and I have talked before about how there's a lot of job programs that take care of like 90 days, and then there's no responsibility on the employer past that. Like we kind of say we're helping someone with disabilities get a job, but like is the continuation there? Like, so will you just talk about because I know that's kind of a big thing that you really focus on, and I want you to share obviously about your new company and kind of like what you do with that, but just also like what do you think is the biggest barrier when it comes to having employers employ people with disabilities and keep them in their work?
Yeah, no, I get that. Yeah, my company's What's Next. There you go, because I've always say that. Now every time I'm talking to my kids and I say, okay, guys, what's next? I'm like, come on, that's not what we're doing. But anyway, a lot of times, yes, with providers, typically how the voc rehab system works is they sign up, the client signs up, they work with the provider to get a job, and then after 90 days, the case closes, hopefully successfully. And sayonara, the provider can go away because they should be doing it. We all know that's difficult. And it's also the teacher in me, I still talk to kids that I had 10, 12 years ago, 15 years ago. So that's hard for me. And I've just I reach out to them. I know where they work, so I go in there. And it's just, they know that I'm there. Sometimes at the 90-day mark, people get really nervous because they're like, well, this is it. I'm by myself. Even though we've done everything we can do to connect the two and they have someone to go to, it just is still nerve wracking because you're losing something else. So, I've really tried to work at just keeping communication open with my people, and they like it, and it doesn't take anything off of me. You know what I mean? It's a text. It's not hard.
Yeah.
And so I've really liked that. And some people want to be done and they don't want to talk. That's fine. Whatever, I get that too.
There, yeah.
But I mean, honestly, I think the biggest overall barrier is transportation. It's tough.
Yeah.
I've had some of my clients through this that can drive. And in my whole teaching career, I think I maybe had one that could drive. And so when my first client was like, well, I can't go to this interview because my car is in the shop. And I was like, well, you can drive. And so I was just, beside myself. It happens more often now, so I'm cooler now. But it was just one of those things it's rough, it's hard. And there's only a few avenues for transportation. So I have to kind of try to work with them, not do it for them because that's not going to help in the long run, but really say, call these people and ask them, or call this place and let's figure it out. And that's hard. I try to look close to their houses, but it doesn't always work.
Tell me, like, if I had a young adult with an intellectual or developmental disability and they wanted to enter the workforce, like, what does it look like to work with you? How does that get?
That's a good question. So if they want to work with me, you could do private pay, but I typically don't like that just because you don't know how long it's going to take.
Yeah.
I don't know how long it could take, or, I mean, I hate to say, but sometimes it may not happen. It just depends on a lot of variables in there. But sign up through Voc Rehab, and it doesn't cost you anything. I do the exact same thing. So they sign up, they meet with a Voc Rehab counselor, and they do what's called a IPE, not an IEP. They just switch some letters around, and individual plan for employment, and then they pick a provider off of the list, and that's where I am, and they can pick me. And then the Voc Rehab counselor sends me an email with a referral, and I accept it, and then I contact the family or the individual, and we start working together. Have to do an action plan, and then after that, we start searching for a job.
Awesome.
So yeah, that's pretty much the process.
I love that. So tell me, so you work primarily with people who are looking for jobs.
Mm-hmm.
But if there was an employer listening to this podcast and going, I'm open to the idea of employing people with disabilities, but I don't know what I would need to have set in place, or like I don't know how to start, what would be your advice to an employer who wants to do that but just doesn't know where to begin?
First of all, it'd be call me. Second of all, it'd just be, sometimes I think there's still, as far as we've come a long way. I know that your family has worked in this realm for decades, you know what I mean? And so we've come a long way in the short time, but there's still work to do, and there's still some of that nervousness or that stigma, or you're like, well, I just don't know. I can't employ someone just to do for a little bit of time. But I think if you started there, it can grow. But we can't just jump in and do everything. We've got to start small and then build confidence and trust. And that's what I try to impress upon the employers. Is I'm like, you're going to have an employee that is dedicated, that's loyal, that is fun, 99% of the time. Yeah, it's fun. But it's taking, I hate to use the term taking a chance, but it's, giving them a chance. For you, me, I guess, typical American, we go and we talk to people about what we could do. That's the job process. Yeah. For a lot of our guys, they really struggle with that. They can't just go in and say, hey, I'd like you to hire me because I don't know what I can do, but I can do this, and so that's kind of my stump speech, as it were. If I just call people, cold call and say, I'm the bridge between my client and you guys. And so we got to walk across the bridge together, and then I let go of your hand because you're on the other side, but I'm still over there to wave at you. But you know what I mean? It's one of those things that I try to tell them, I'm there to work with you
Yeah.
and help you navigate some things. Maybe it looks different if a person's upset. They may need a minute to reset, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But we've got to work to figure that out. One of my guys at Buffalo Wild Wings, who
Hmm.
he really struggles to sometimes keep his focus. He's gotten a lot better over the years, but he would kind of stand and maybe watch the TV, at Buffalo Wild Wings. And I was like, hey, man, we got to keep going. And
Yeah.
so I was talking to the management, and I talked to the guy, and we kind of worked it out. And I just printed off a picture of Mario, and above it I said, keep going. And I stuck it on the wall. And that was like over a year ago, and it's still there. So I really like seeing that when I go. But when he tells me, I'm like, hey, are you going? And he's like, yeah, I'm keeping going. And so it's just, that's easy though,
Yeah.
right? But not everybody thinks of that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Well, and I think I love that you say that because, it's a risk to hire anyone anytime. I think sometimes people are like,
right.
well, what are the risks? What are the pros and cons of hiring someone with disabilities? It's like, it's a risk to hire.
Anybody.
Like everyone's different and everyone has their own little quirks, and you don't fully know how someone will handle your work environment or if it'll be a good fit. And so I think people sometimes get stuck in that when it comes to people with disabilities, and it's like, oh, but I'm not trained and I don't have all these things. And it's like, well, it's probably more simple than you think. And I love like the
Hmm.
Mario thing is like, yeah, all our friend needed was a reminder, a fun reminder to keep going. And
Hmm.
so, like when it's like, oh, don't overcomplicate it. Don't make it
Yeah.
bigger than it has to be.
It's easy to get in your own head, but you can let it go and get things done, and it's really easy. And what employers don't always see or get, because it's really hard for them to get, is how much this means to our community and how much it means to their family. Because some of their family members are like, I'm not sure. When you told me about this, I don't know. And I'm like, just trust me, let's try it out. And then here we are years down the road, and they're still going. So it's a good thing, but it's hard, building the trust when you just meet someone.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I feel, and again, I'm not a parent of a child with disabilities, but I've walked alongside many.
Hmm.
And, something that I feel like I see a lot and used to talk about with parents at my old job is I would say, I understand that you have to advocate 24/7. Yeah, a parent of a child with disabilities is just often it is their natural state to advocate and to feel almost in this like fight mode is a really intense term, but like,
It is.
you have to protect your child. You have to make sure they're being welcomed, they're being included, they're being cared for. And so
Hmm.
yeah, I feel like what do you say to a parent that maybe has reservations and is like, I'm nervous about, my son, my daughter wants a job, but I'm the one who's nervous about that. What do you say to them?
Kind of what I said a little bit ago. Just we need to give it a try. What is the absolute worst that can happen?
Yeah.
Is we go in, we try it. It's a little too overwhelming. We pull back, maybe retool. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
had one client that unfortunately, he got a job and he wasn't able to keep because his anxiety couldn't get him out of the car. You know what I mean? I wasn't
Yeah.
the employer. That wasn't me. It
Yeah.
just his
Yeah.
anxiety, and I tried calling him before work. We did lots of things, worked with the parent, but it just he couldn't do it. Now, if we give it a little bit of time, I told the parents, how about you try having him volunteer somewhere? Go somewhere, volunteer, see if we can do that.
Relieve the pressure.
When I was teaching at East, and even now in Goddard, where I'm a part-time transition coordinator, as soon as parents walk in the door, their freshman year, I meet them and say, what do they want to do? Have you thought about that? And I've had some parents that said, I haven't even been here a minute. And I'm like, I get it. But you have now less than 4 years in this building because you just walked in.
Yeah.
But, it's one of those that I just say you need to start thinking about it. And, in that role that I have, which I really like too, is I'm like, let me walk with you for these 4 years and let's figure it out, and let's
Yeah.
do some practice, let's do some shadows. And I tell them, go sit somewhere. Every kid likes to go eat at McDonald's. Not that everybody's going to work there, but go sit there and eat and talk about what is going on.
Yeah.
Watch them work and say, I don't
Wow.
like this, or I do. You know what I mean? It's fine to say you don't like it. And that's sometimes with my clients, they struggle because they think I want to hear, yeah, I'll do this or I'll do this when I throw out ideas. And I'm like, if you don't like it, tell me you don't like it.
Yeah.
Not everybody wants to work in a daycare, you know? So that's sometimes hard because they want to tell me what they think I want to hear. And I'm like, I'm just throwing everything at the wall and we'll see what fits.
Yeah, I love it. So my friend Jacob, who we're besties. He spent the weekend here a few weekends ago, and we were talking about Unstoppable God Ministries, and he was saying that we need an office. And I said, well, I very much agree, we need an office. But Jacob loves to clean. Like, I don't know how much he really cleans at his own house, but when he comes to mine, he is like getting on to my toddler and is like, we need to pick up our toys right now, and like helps me do the dishes. It's fantastic. But he told me, he was like, you're gonna get an office and I'm gonna clean it. And I was done. Like, yes, handshake now. You are hired. When I get to the point where I have an office and can hire employees, like, if you want to keep this place clean, that's awesome.
Right.
But, someone asked, like, oh, well, would you plan to hire people with disabilities at UGM? Well, undoubtedly. Like, yes,
Yeah.
because that is my passion. But B, I know for a fact that Jacob could certainly hold that job. Or, I think one of my friends has offered her nannying services for years and years and years. And I'm like, girl, I probably would hire you. And just people have to get out of the box as far as, there we go with box language again, someone with a disability can or can't do and what the workforce looks like, because it's just not as complicated as we make it. I want to talk a little bit, you mentioned transition, and I'll try not to go down like full rabbit hole, because that could be,
I could talk forever on that too.
But you bring up a good point, because the transition, when we're talking about transition as far as like, adolescence into adulthood, I started seriously considering what I wanted to do in my future, my junior year of high school, right? Start visiting the CCC,
Right.
And then fall of senior year, turned in my applications and, graduated high school, went to college. But for a person with disabilities, it's really at age 12, they're starting to ask, like, do you know if you'll want them in residential services? Will they want a job and all these things? Because the way the system is and everything, that wait list for funding and all the things, can you just talk about, like, can you explain, I guess, what your role is as a transition coordinator and why it's helpful for a parent to make sure that they're getting in contact with you if that's available?
Which it's interesting because I always say to everybody that, like, all my jobs, like I have like all these jobs and they all essentially are the same thing, but they're just like different spots. So if I'm going to a place for Goddard to talk to someone about like internship sites for our 18 to 21 kids, I'm like, okay, which one is this? This is Goddard. And I just like tell myself, and it's so silly, but but just really at age, like you said, 12 to 14. 14 is typically the start on IEP transition services. But, I have built something where in elementary school, you've got to get on the list. You may not need services. You don't know that, but at least get on the SCDDO waiver list. So that way, in case you do need something 10 years from now, you're good.
Yeah.
But then at the middle school level, it becomes more, we need to start really thinking about what kinds of jobs you may want to do. Or do you not want to work and you want to look at a day program? And a lot of parents aren't quite ready for that yet, but at least having those conversations with them at that age. But when they get to high school, like I've had a whole bunch of meetings so far with parents, and we're just talking about what are you thinking?
Yeah.
And then I kind of give my ideas, and then we kind of talk together, because so many people and parents and all the way around, Wichita, Goddard, whatever, the law says 21. But I don't know about you, but at 18, I wanted out of school. I did not want to stay in school. And so college, okay. But, a lot of them, it's just there. So you don't have to think about it until 21. And so I've really tried to make my presence felt as in, let's figure this out. We're going to pretend and talk like 18's it. Yeah. If we get to senior year and we're talking more and we're like, we may need a little bit more services for this, that's fine. But what I call extend the diving board, you don't just walk to the end and jump off. I'm helping you, but we need to inch it out so we can figure it out. Don't plan for the end, because then you're not going to do anything all the way until the end. So I really, really, really push that with my parents. And I'm having some pretty good success feedback with that because it's not coming off pushy. I don't want it to be pushy. We need to figure it out.
Of that. So we'll wrap it up a little bit, but I want to talk. First of all, I know that you also have faith in Jesus and that's important to you as well. And so I love that. I guess I'm curious, how does your faith play? I know you're not a Christian company, but how does your faith just kind of play into your passions for people with disabilities? And then also like dreaming big, like if you could have anything for what's next for you, for your clients that you work with, like what's that dream, that impact that you want to have?
Kind of had an interesting faith journey, as it were. I went as a kid, and it was kind of like felt like I had to go type thing, and just wasn't as engaged. Which I mean, youth, okay, I'll give it that. And me and Katie started going to New Spring like 10 years ago. I want to say, maybe 11, and it just, the messages really hit me. Thinking about what the purpose is and what, even though frustrating things can happen, it's there to teach us something. God's there to kind of say, okay, well, navigate this water. And so that's, when I was talking about leaving the classroom, and I think that was all I could do, because that's all I've ever done, really. And it was scary, and just things kept happening, and I just felt like, we prayed about it a lot. I felt like God kept telling me, give me a little sign saying, see, there you go. I'm like, okay. And so making that jump was hard because, I got 3 kids.
Yeah.
I've got to be set. So it was nerve wracking, but, this is my 2nd year. Yeah. It's almost starting year 3 in January. So, it's going really well. And he keeps opening other doors because I can't say no. So there's just all these other weird avenues opening that are, he's just like, I told you,
trust me.
I was going to provide, and it's going to be fine. And sometimes we get in our own way. And so I have to keep reminding myself that sometimes, something happens and like, it's still fine. We're still good.
Yeah. I feel like you and I have a lot in common in just like these past 3 years. I think we both could have been happy continuing to do what we were doing. And yet when God calls you to do something and you step into that obedience, it's terrifying. But, and I assume you feel this way too, but I know like I feel so blessed, and I'm so glad that I took a leap of faith and stepped out and trusted God with a change when I could have not.
Mm-hmm.
And continued. And it's not like there's anything wrong with the past. I still very much love and was at an ability point program last weekend. Like,
Mm-hmm.
very connected, but it's just been really cool to watch you as I had my thing too, and be like, man, you trust in God, you take a step, you take a risk, and look at the good that can come from it. And I believe that there's so much more to come as well.
No, I totally agree. I think about that a lot, just working with the people. And yes, sometimes there's frustrating days, sometimes there's a person that's like, well, I don't really want to do this. I want to do this. And I'm like, but this place is really nice to you. You know what I mean? But and then they're like, well, it's also they're in charge of their life. You know what I mean? So then they do that. And then if something doesn't happen and, for them at this spot, then I'm like, okay. But it's, just being able to help. I feel like I'm able to help a bigger scale than just my little sect that I had at East. You know what I mean? Not that I love those kids, and I actually talked to one today. He called me from who knows where. But, it's just one of those things that they know that I'm around, and now I'm able to talk to every community around, and it's really been nice to see the community open up and just get to know a lot more people, and a lot varied, because I'm working with a lot of different disabilities than I did.
Yeah.
So it's been kind of a learning curve for me, and I like challenges. So it's been kind of.
Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast, and thank you just for everything you do for the disability community. I feel like there's going to be a lot of people that tune in when they see your face. I do. I think you have really been a pillar as far as the IDD community, special education. Your love for people shows, and you prove it again and again in the way you serve them. And so thank you as just someone else who also loves our mutual friends.
I appreciate it. And you're doing amazing things as well.
Thank you.
I personally like the whole potato.
I know it's different. It's different, but it's kind of our thing around here. So.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I am going to link all kinds of information about Jason here in the show notes. So if you are interested in employment for your child with intellectual and developmental disabilities, or just want to learn more about what Jason's going on, make sure you click the links in the bio. And with that, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Jason, thank you for being here, and we'll see you guys next week.
Thanks.